All right, good morning, everyone. I am Laura Marine, and I am your friendly moderator for the day, or for the morning, or just for this session, actually. You guys are in Improving Texas Outcomes Evidence-Based Grant Making, if that's not the room you intended. Okay. So we welcome you to the conference today. It's going to be an action-packed day all day long. Please make sure that your phones are turned off. If you need to take a call, please do so outside of the room. And of course, the restrooms are so conveniently located just for you right outside this door. I am pleased to announce our presenters. I'm going to let them introduce themselves individually because they have so much information about themselves. But thank you all for being here, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Williams. I am the Director of Workforce Grants and Initiatives for the Texas Workforce Commission. And we are really committed to developing and changing all of our grants to this evidence-based model. So thank you for being here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Diane Tackett. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with Workforce Solutions Rural Capital Area. I'm glad everybody's here this morning.
And good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Clinton. I'm the manager for the Special Initiatives and Federal Grants team with the Texas Workforce Commission. Glad you could all be here and just excited to present on this topic today.
Okay, so just really quickly, show of hands, who knows what evidence-based grant making is? Okay. I just want to make sure that what we were talking about here was relevant to what your knowledge base is. The reasons why we're moving to evidence-based grant making is that we're trying to begin investing in what the new normal is. We need to ensure that governmental decision makers have the evidence that they need to be able to fund the programs that we want to have. There is evidence. First, we need to define what this means, the evidence of effectiveness. We need to have a common understanding of what this evidence base is. We do and have had 2 programs now that utilize outcomes-based payments, because if someone is really doing well and having great outcomes, wonderful. And if not, what can we do to help? This ensures that both the grantee and the Texas Workforce Commission, or whomever the grantor may be, is really monitoring what's happening. And we will be using this data that we collect, the evidence that we collect, to ensure that we can report out. Data is what we collect from people. Stories are what we collect from people. So data tell the story. Okay. Having an evidence-based workforce system means that our limited funding will be focused toward where it can really do the greatest impact. We're not about excluding programs, so I do want to reassure everyone in this room that if your organization does want to apply for an evidence-based type of grant, there is no exclusion. This is a bonus at this point in time. We're moving to make it the new normal, but again, right now it's just a bonus. So some of the goals are better collaboration. Like I said, when we're doing this work and everybody's really monitoring, everybody's really looking at it, everybody's really trying to ensure that we're getting the outcomes that we want, then that means that we're collaborating better. It helps everyone build the evidence base. We do want to focus on equity. I'm sure that anyone in this room who has looked at any Department of Labor grants here recently knows that the Department of Labor is looking at DEIA, which they say out somehow, DIA something. Anyway, it's diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. We want to make sure that everybody has the same goals. I don't know, sometimes we all make assumptions that we have the same goals, and then we find out that, yeah, no, we really didn't. And we want to identify and bridge these gaps, these achievement gaps across everywhere. So there are some roles and responsibilities when we're looking at this type of grant making. As the grantor has to be committed to the collaboration. They have to be not coming down on anybody, but saying, okay, this is what we're seeing. What can we do to help? We have to understand the goals of the program. Again, how often have we been in a situation where my goals and your goals really didn't align, even though we thought that they did? And we have to be dedicated to achieving the desired outcomes. Applicants and then grantees have to be committed to learning. They have to be committed to change and improvement. This process does take a lot of research. It does take time. So it's not just a fast, we're going to do this and it's all going to be great. And then the grantees also have to be dedicated to collecting the data that we need. There are 5 levels in the Texas framework. We have the new program tier. The new program tier is something that's never been done before. It's not replicable. This is an idea that we have that we just want to see if it works. We have the experience program tier. That's a program that actually has been offered before, but doesn't really have great data. We've done it before, we think it works anecdotally. Now we need to do it and collect the data to ensure that what we say we're doing is what we're doing. The performance program tier, and this is the program tier that we really do want to see everybody at. So please know, like I said, this is not, you have to start out at the top. This is a learning process. The performance program tier is something that's been offered before, that we have the records, we have the data on, and we have enough of that to show that this program has had an impact for at least 2 years. The moderate evidence tier is a program where the grantee may have offered it before or something very similar, but now I'm going to go get the research. I'm going to go to some place and I'm going to find studies showing that this, not only have I done it before, and you may not have done it before, know that, but know that this is a replicable thing that I can do. And then the high evidence tier is that I find 2 studies showing that this has been done before and had an impact. Now, when we started on this journey 2 years ago, we really weren't sure what it was going to look like. And when I say we, I'm talking about Texas Workforce Commission. And what we have found is that really applicants had fewer challenges responding to this than expected, even during the very first one. Applicants reported that the evidence-based section really did not significantly increase their workload. So although it does require that research, it wasn't such a heavy lift that they weren't willing to do it. And they showed more evidence. Now, here in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tackett, and she's going to discuss about how to build that evidence, where to get that evidence from. But I do want to say that, like I said a few minutes ago, this is extra points. So when we are getting these applications, every application is scored exactly the same as every other one. And then if there's evidence provided, that gives extra points. So we do not want people to think that, oh, I can't apply because I don't have this research. We want people to do the research so that they can make their application better. Would you like to talk about how to build this evidence base, Diane?
No. But I will. All right. All right, everybody, good morning. Thank you so much for being here this morning. And I know this is a riveting topic at, 8:39. We got 10 minutes. We're 10 minutes in.
I know, I
Only-
was supposed to take longer.
Only a few more minutes to go.
I talk fast.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about building evidence, though, because, kind of looking at it from the Texas Workforce Commission perspective and then looking at it from the perspective of a workforce development board, in as much as we're talking about similar topics, kind of where the rubber meets the road is a little bit different. And I know that Ryan's going to talk a little bit more about the special contracts and grants that TWC offers and how that evidence framework looks in those grants and contracts. But I want to talk about what that looks like from a service provider perspective. So many of us have been doing this for a few years now. And we've got some common knowledge and common framework that we're using to guide our understanding and guide our decision making on what we would like to see in our local areas and how we would like our programs to be implemented. So I think it's not very likely that many of us are at the new program tier, but say perhaps you wanted to try something that has not been tried in your area before, that would be something that would be considered potentially a new program. And if there's not anything available that you could pull from that kind of shows the effectiveness of that type of intervention or that type of service delivery, then you would kind of be building this from the ground up. I think more of us are really in that experienced program tier level. I always like it when my staff take pictures when I'm talking, and then they send it back. It's like proof to my CEO that I'm actually doing something, so I do appreciate that. So the experience level is at the very least where most of us are, right? We've offered this before. We've got a little bit of knowledge. We understand that we've had, some positive experiences. Maybe not everybody has achieved the intended results, but we're starting to gain that kind of knowledge base. And once you gain that knowledge base, the whole idea of building evidence is learning how to track that in a way that's going to be comparable. You want to track like against like, and then you want to be able to evaluate those data points to determine the results that you get, be able to quantify those results, and then ask the question, did that achieve the purpose that we wanted that intervention or that service delivery to achieve? And so that kind of brings us to the performance tier. For those of you that have been doing workforce development for a while, we know that we in the past have kind of lived and died by our contracted performance measures, right? We've got entered employment, we've got retention, we've got credential, measurable skills gain. That is a way of starting to gather that data and starting to provide the opportunity to make informed decisions on, are we achieving our desired results? Now, I would posit, this is not intended to go anywhere other than this room, that in as much as we have our systems built around what the Department of Labor and some of the other federal departments and our state partners say are appropriate measures of success, if you achieve this in your performance measure, that minimum amount of performance, then you're successful. I would posit that what we're talking about here in terms of building evidence has the opportunity to go beyond what is currently being measured. And that's where I want to talk about the last two tiers, the moderate evidence and then the high evidence tier. These are the two areas that have been really interesting for me to dive into as a workforce development professional, because this is where I can look at a specific population that we're trying to serve, or I can look at a specific way that case management is being applied and determine, are we applying that task or that program in a way that's achieving results that we would really like to achieve? And I don't need to create it all myself. I can go back and look at other research that has been done to show areas where there has been highly reliable, highly validated support to show that a particular intervention has worked for a particular population, or that, for example, the results of trauma-informed case management compared to other methods of case management have proven to provide longer-term benefit for our participants who are involved in our programs. And so, from my perspective, looking at it, when we start to look at how to build evidence, I also want to say that we're not going to be able to eat the whole elephant at once. I think it's a matter of starting with your stakeholders and your key community partners, or the key representatives that you would like to bring to the table, to really have focused and intentional discussion about what is the effect that you're trying to achieve, and kind of drill down into what does that look like, where can you create the most benefit. And then I would say look for something that has been replicated or already tried in a similar area, and see what components of that could be replicated in your area. I think the key to doing this is to really have discussions on how would you measure success? How do you know that program A has achieved its intended outcomes, and really verbalize what that looks like? Because again, it's kind of an idea of looking at what we've done historically in terms of our contracted performance measures. That's a really strong base of experience and performance related evidence. But let's go to the next level of that. Let's see what we can do to dive into case management support and other things, or dive into a specific population that we haven't really had as high of outcomes in the past, and see what's available, what we can really do to focus our resources on that intervention to improve the outcomes for that particular group. Now, when I talk about building evidence, part of the reason that this is important to me as a Workforce Development Board representative is because we would like to show our community that the services we're providing are relevant to the community. We need to show that we're supporting the needs of business and industry in our area, and we need to show that we are helping the economic base of our communities expand. In our rural areas, we have the concern where young people tend to leave our area to get training or to go to school, and they tend not to come back to our rural communities. And you can see that displayed in our labor market information, because you can see the gap of the workforce and of the average age of different communities and counties that we serve. And so being able to go to our community representatives and say, not just we're providing these services, but to be able to say, and they are proven to work, and we can show you through data the impact that has on communities, has really kind of helped to turn the conversation around for us. So for Rural Capital as a board to be a funder, the reason why we're focusing on an evidence base and an evidence framework is because we need to be able to quantify the impact to our communities. And we want to be able to show that to our funding source, to our legislators, and to our other elected representatives, because that will also help them, in turn, support the work that we are doing as workforce development and as childcare and early learning. So one of the things I would like to do, when we're talking about building evidence, we don't have to take all of the services we do all at once. Where Rural Capital has been effective is we started to look at one population. We started to look at our youth population, and we said, we know that we're doing pretty good providing services through our WIOA youth program and through some of our other programs, but we think we could be better. And how can we be better? So we went to a couple of those different databases, clearinghouses that are listed up there, and we started to look for other types of interventions that have been more effective for youth in communities that were similar to ours. Now, what we did is, this is where what Sandra was talking about in terms of roles and responsibilities. We identified what we wanted to achieve and what that vision of success looked like for our rural capital communities. And then we worked with our contractor, our workforce contractor to be able to develop a plan to bring certain elements of those different strategies that have worked into the service delivery that they're providing. As we do that, we will measure, we have the baseline of what happened prior to that service change being implemented, and then we can measure what the outcomes are and what the outputs are after that intervention has been deployed. And so, it's been helpful for us. It's been helpful, I think, for our service provider to be able to kind of see that there's different ways of providing service, and to be able to be creative and a little bit more flexible in service delivery. And it kind of helps because we as the board approach it as, kind of there's no wrong door. If it seems reasonable, we want to try to provide that opportunity. And we're going to do what we can to make that work within the boundaries of our funding guidelines. I think the other piece that's a little bit different for myself as a workforce development board is when we're looking at building evidence and measuring the successful outcomes of a service intervention, we are not looking at it as one funding source. We look at it as a service to youth or a service to job seekers. And then we align our funding sources in as much as we can to be able to provide that same level and intervention type of service across all funding streams. So I think that's something that's been a little bit different for us as well. It has allowed us to be a little bit more flexible to apply for funding streams from other organizations and other federal departments and things like that than what we've looked at in the past. But it's a way of just really being able to shore up, here's our hypothesis of what will work in the rural communities. Here's what we've implemented, and the data shows that it has achieved these outcomes. The other piece about this that I would like to talk about is, realistically speaking, not everything you try is going to work, and that's okay. The good piece about this is that you have more than anecdotal evidence saying that it doesn't work. You actually have some tracking and some data to support the time frame that you tried a particular intervention, that it does not appear to be receiving the results that you would like to achieve. And you can use that to kind of support a change in focus or a change in service delivery. I think what's really interesting about this too, from a contractor perspective, is it really offers the ability to put the impetus for change in your contractor's hands, where they can say, I'm not waiting for our board to identify that there's an issue. They're analyzing the data themselves, and they're able to make those midstream corrections quickly and efficiently to be able to meet the desired outcome. So I know I'm going to let Ryan talk a little bit about special initiatives from TWC, but for the way to build evidence, the first thing I would do is talk to your stakeholders, talk to your board of directors, find out very succinctly and specifically what is it that they would like to see, and make that kind of the hypothesis, and then identify, you can drill down into that and identify what data do you need to begin to collect that will show that you've achieved that goal, or that you're on the track to achieve that goal, and identify those benchmarks and be willing to track those benchmarks. Be willing to look at that on a regular basis with your contractor and have those open, honest discussions of, does this seem to be working? Do we need to look at some other options? Let's see what's available in other areas or in other communities that have worked, and pull some of those elements in. So that's kind of where we started, and it's exciting. We're not there yet, but we've been able to do some really interesting things because of that, and we're looking at ways that we can collect data in ways that we have not been able to collect it in the past, or in ways that we have not thought about collecting it in the past. So that's been exciting for us as well. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to let Ryan go. Yes.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Ryan Clinton, and I am the manager for Special Initiatives with Special Initiative Grants with Texas Workforce Commission. You know how they say save the best for last? Well, my boss is to the left of me, so that is not the case here. I've got to make sure that I go ahead and state that. So,
We did.
yeah, there we go. Want to talk a little bit about what TWC is doing and the direction that we're moving in with evidence-based programs. So I've worked with evidence-based programs for a while. OJJDP, Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, they had their, what do they call that? Best practices guide, which is very similar to evidence-based programs. And basically why we try and establish or use these type of programs is, one, to help with the potential waste on ineffective interventions. We want to make sure that we are funding the best programs that we can. We are accountable for the dollars that we're using. So you got to remember, we're going to go through audits. People are going to be taking a look at, your finances. What are we doing? What are we expending on? You have to excuse me. I'm a little bit tired. Got home late from Reno. So my daughter had a volleyball tournament there. So, and basically we want to take a look at outcomes. We want to make sure that the programs that we are funding are providing effective outcomes. So in fiscal year 21, TWC started our first RFA for evidence-based programs. This was with our building construction trade grants. With this grant, keep in mind, as Sandra said, these are bonus points for evidence-based programs. So with the building construction trade grants, what we did was we posted our RFA. This is a 2-year grant program. This program is about to end this August. We're going through the data, looking at our information, and excuse me. Ugh, I'm not feeling good.
What?
Yeah.
Do you need me to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry.
Excuse us for that. So, the building construction trades, we sought the evidence-based applications, and as Brian said, these grants are going to be ending in August. Now, I do want to note one thing, because as Diane said, and as I said, this also shows us what isn't working, okay? Because our first building construction trades, we decided to target opportunity youth. And the very narrowest definition of that population. And so therefore, we've really had a bumpy ride with this. We've gotten great evidence that we need better ways to outreach these youth. So and I'm looking at his notes because, so these grants, we've been adjusting the whole time. And so now we're starting to get to some real evidence of what needs to happen to have these types of grants be successful. Building construction trades was not a new grant for the Texas Workforce Commission. So when we narrowed that target, we were really able to see, okay, it's not the program, it's the population. And the second one that we did was the Texas Talent Connection. The second iteration of Texas Talent Connection is currently in the process of evaluation, and this is funded through the Texas Workforce Investment Council, so TWIC. And hold on. So these are really we're starting to collect the data. We're in the second quarter of the current grant. The next one is about to be awarded. So we are starting to see, and we're seeing a lot of innovation in the applications that we get. We're getting very creative applications, which whenever I say that, I'm not talking about a total 360. I'm talking about, let us add this one thing. And that invokes this sense of excitement. It invokes this sense of movement. And, it's not the same old thing.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Can you explain the connection between TWC and TWIC?
Texas Workforce Investment Council is the state workforce council. So we work with them very closely on a lot of projects, evidence-based grant making being one of them. And so it's really a partnership. It's the same type of partnership as TWC has with the boards. Because the TWIC is basically the state level board. So. Okay. And the evaluations. Oh, yes.
Cool question. So when you talk about your data collection, like how are you collecting that data? Were you collecting it through their quarterly reports, or like how are you looking at that as it's rolling over those 2 years?
We do look at their quarterly reports. We analyze their quarterly reports. We're also looking at expenditures. So we're looking at expenditures on a monthly basis. And then we're looking at the participant level data on a quarterly basis. But everyone in the room here who's a workforce board knows that services follow the money. You have to spend the money to be able to provide the services, right? And when we see month over month no change in expenditures, then we don't wait for the quarterly report. Any other questions? All right. Oh, wait a minute. So this process does strengthen grant proposals, as I said, and it does provide us more innovation, more changes, and they're not huge changes, but they're big enough to really make an impact, because it doesn't have to be a sea change to have an impact. We award bonus programs for the program design, or bonus points for the program design. And this is making our applicants and then our grantees really kind of, as Diane said, they're looking, they're thinking, they're engaging their stakeholders. They're really bringing some value. And not bringing the value, but showing the value. We don't need to be the best kept secret. We need to be the one that everybody comes to, without somebody saying, "Hey, did you know?" Oh, skip. Okay, so we do have our framework completed, and we are currently working with the governor's office, which is TWIC. We're working with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. We're hoping to begin engaging the Texas Education Agency, but this framework is going to be pretty much set. There's going to be some flexibility in some areas, but if you are interested in it, there is a whole webpage, and it is here on this Texas Workforce Commission evidence-based grant making. I know that all of you know how easily navigatable our webpage is. So if you go up into the little search at the top and you do evidence-based and you do the little quotation marks, it'll pull it up pretty quickly. If you have problems, you can always reach out, because we're always more than happy to advance this. On this website, not only do we have the framework, we also have webinars when we were initially doing this, how were we going to implement it? What was it going to look like? There's a webinar on our outcomes-based payment methodology. So there's a lot of good information here, And again, we're always happy to provide additional information. And I'm way under time. I know. And I apologize for the this last part being a little bit rocky. We're hoping that Mr. Clinton is fine. So what questions did you guys come in here to have answered? Anyone?
Sandra, a couple of questions. So if you're saying that the Texas Workforce Commission is moving towards this, you give us two examples of two grants, you've already done that. What is the time frame in which you're gonna go from just, well, it's nice because you get extra points or, +5 on the test or whatever, versus no, you're not even allowed to submit for, whether it be, I'm thinking of the TII, the educator externships, those other grants that come about. Is there a time frame in which y'all are thinking it's like, no, we must have this to show? Well, that's one. And then along with that, within, for us to propose or within the RFA that gets put out, we boards would have to carve out some funding out of that grant to be able to seek out entities. And I was talking to our CFO earlier, for example, let me take educator externship, and then, some of us have done it several years, and there's a lesson plan to be done, but have we gone back to those educators that participated 1 year versus 5 years to say, what are you doing? Did you really teach the students? How do you feel about what you heard about the economy 5 years ago versus a year ago? And that we would probably contract out with the university, the students, the research department at A&M Corpus Christi, and be able to give that entity some money, some funding to do that job for us, and that they're better poised to do methodical questions. So two things. I hope that we boards are able to incorporate that, or to get the funding to be able to do that. Sometimes within our own staffing, I may be able to call 100 teachers, I may not. But that would be cool. Number two, the flexibility about a timeline of it's nice now, but in 2 years from now, be ready for it, or whoever. It's not going to be an option.
Right. Well, to answer your first question, at this point in time, there are no plans to make it you must at all. In fact, we've incorporated this framework into 2 of our grants, and we're looking at expanding it into our other grant opportunities, looking into it. We haven't done it yet. So,
And that's okay. Yay.
and I love your comment about how do we go back and how do we reach back out. You used specifically the teacher externship example. And what I would say to that is put it in your proposal. Put it in your proposal. TWC is currently contracting with the Ray Marshall Center on our building construction trades grants to do exactly what you were noting.
And funny you mentioned the Ray Marshall Center. Through another grant, the Walmart Foundation grant, where some boards are involved in that, we're getting to see the service delivery at and I don't want to call it self-paced, because I get confused with slow-paced, of how our learners entering the National Retail Federation courses, their pace, but we are trying to gather evidence of, think of some of our other programs where they're fast and furious and we're collecting data versus a more self-paced type of case management, such as a Walmart Foundation grant. I'm saying that because Nelly's doing that, Ms. Reyes.
Yep.
And the Ray Marshall's gathering some really good data, and just like for us, we have students that are still in high school through our TII grant, and we have learners at Goodwill, and then we have WIA out of school youth. And the data that's coming out from the Ray Marshall Center as far as any type of knowledge learned or even wages is awesome. So that is a great entity to work with, the Ray Marshall. So yeah.
Did you want to say something, Diane?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm glad you're my friend.
You can be my friend.
But no, I think the point too of this is that currently not all grants or funding opportunities that are released may be set up to really support extending or expanding that evidence base into one of those more causal and validated models. Also, I think there's some, just from a workforce board perspective, there's this very real lift of, we're talking about evidence base, we're talking about evaluation, but there is a cost to that, and that cost can be high. And so, it could also be that some of the conversation we have as a group of boards, a group of statewide professionals, is to say, how can we reduce that lift or that burden on any one particular area and really come together to work on ways that we can further our evidence base in Texas in a manner that's pragmatic and affordable, and still kind of supporting that movement. Because there's a couple of things I want to point out. We've talked about reducing fraud and being able to be good stewards of money, and the evidence base does help support that. But we're also seeing a change. I think at the state level change is reflective of the change that's happening at the national level, where you're seeing specifically in funding opportunities prove to me that the intervention that you're describing is going to work, because those federal organizations are under the same pressure of being able to prove relevance, being able to prove return on investment. And in a way of looking at it, it really is return on investment. We are investing in our workforce to be able to continue to grow our economy at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. But I think some of these questions, in terms of when we're really at the point to look at how are we evaluating and what organization can we use to objectively help us evaluate, are good questions to bring up, because I think those are the discussions we need to have.
I agree.
Okay.
I 100% agree.
So my friendship card hasn't been taken away?
Your friendship card will never be taken away. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And we heard it yesterday afternoon. I'm not going to butcher her name, but she had noted where in the LA area, they had pulled together all of these employers. And I don't know, I picked up on this. There were 7 workforce boards that came and were part of that initiative, where they got Amazon and Google into the room as well. So she was talking about consortiums of employers, but she noted, and she didn't really drive it home, but there were 7 different workforce boards that leveraged, that put aside their competitions and were at the table, as well as the employers and as well as the community colleges. So no, I 100% agree. The more regional people we can get in the room, the better the room is representative of the entire area, the better outcomes we're going to have. And at the end of the day, gathering evidence is about the right outcomes. We talk about outputs or outcomes. Outcomes are the impact that we have on people's lives. Outputs are the number of credentials that we finish, that we have somebody finish. But if you get a credential and you never use it, is it valuable? If you use it, then you have an outcome.
Sandra, if there's, I have just another question. So for DOL, they have, I think they're clearing whatever, that's the DOL. Do we, at the commission, plan on having our own portal where the boards get to start to share their evidence base, and that, yes, you mentioned the word we're competitive amongst boards, but really we also are looking for regional partnerships with our neighboring boards, and we may see that other boards have done a level of work with a certain group, and we want to go see how they did it. If it's comparable to the population size, to the demographics, we certainly want to know, well, how did rural capital do it? To be able to see their evidence base, or do we not yet have enough evidence-based data to be able to create that portal? I think that would be helpful for us to have as boards.
That is a wonderful idea, Alma, and not something that we had thought about previously. I can't answer the question as to what evidence-based opportunities different boards have done. I know it's been shared with me.
Yeah.
But no, that's a great idea.
I
And
just think it's more applicable, sometimes than even looking at the DOL data. I mean, it's awesome. I've seen a lot of good evidence at their website, but eventually, if we start dropping, like rural capital,
Yeah.
The ones that you have, the construction grants, if that is from a higher ed right now, I think in our area is Delmar College, asking them, put as part of the requirements for deliverables is that you share your evidence-based so that we can see.
right.
Start building on it, we can start with 2 or 3 stories and then, that would be a great source for us that are responsible for writing grants.
In a sense, with the eligible training provider list, there's
Yeah.
building towards a level of evidence that our training providers have to
Yes.
report on, right? So is it, you moved.
Yeah, I'm moving.
Is it a possibility to then take, when grants have been completed, be able to either at a what is it called, anonymized level or a very real level, be able to report out on the outcomes of those grants so that we can see, maybe 5 recipients got this grant and recipient 1 achieved this, recipient 2 achieved that. I'm
Right.
just making more work
No.
for you.
No, I'm taking notes, guys. Because just because we haven't thought about it doesn't mean that it's not a wonderful and great idea that we need to figure out how to operationalize.
I think this just kind of led me to think that the first piece of building an evidence-based framework is really having some transparency among and between grantees, right? If this all happens in this shroud of grantee A doesn't know what grantee B is doing, then you never really know if the work that you're doing is effective either, right? Like I can be sitting there in rural capital being like, hey, this is fantastic. 75% of the people that went through this program got employment, not realizing that there's a program down the road that has a 98% or something like that, So it's having that courage, I think, to be able to share outcomes as well and be able to have that continuous improvement and learning opportunity.
And I just want to say that everyone in this room knows how adverse to sharing I am. Right? Everyone knows how adverse to sharing I am.
Is that sarcasm?
That is sarcasm. No, it's not that early. No, I am totally the person that will that I will share every way that I can. And if someone asks me for something, and I'm not sure, I know that this has happened, it's probably happened to any one of you guys that have talked to me. Somebody will call me and ask me for some piece of information, and I'm like, let me see, because I know a different area that's doing it, but I never want to share that information until I contact that area and say, hey, so-and-so is interested in this. Do you mind? Can I connect you? Any other questions? Yes.
I had to formulate my question and write it down, so I'm going to read it for you. As TWC moves towards evidence-based grant making, can you share what the anticipated time frame for TWC is looking at for evaluating evidence and performance outcomes after a grant ends, and share those lessons learned in the work with the workforce boards and providing board support when implementing innovations into new grant awards?
Mr. Brown, can you bring that to me so I can read it? Yeah, I need to dissect this question.
Sorry. And you have touched on a little bit of that, but my idea is that when a grant ends, how are the boards going to implement the lessons learned within enough time to apply for a new grant kind of thing?
Okay.
It might be an ongoing process, so.
I think that it really is an ongoing process. And you do touch on something that is a challenge, and I think that it's a challenge for us and for boards. And Alma also touched on it, which is how do you afford to go back to a program 5 years ago and see if what we did, whatever that may be, is continuing to have impacts, or what impacts that is having. So, ideas are welcome.
So I think one of the unintended consequences of the way fund making happens at this point is that it's very myopic. You've got 12 months, you've got 15 months, you've got 18 months. The grant closes, and then there's not that support to be able to go back and look at long-term outcomes or retention or what that looks like. And I mean, really, if you think about it, that's something that's happening currently with the federal grants that we all implement, right? We have measures post-exit, but that's only a certain amount of time. When you're looking at impact to the community or impact to the family, there might need to be a more longitudinal approach to measuring that and the ability to do that. And we know that where the funding stops, the focus tends to stop as well. And I think that's, as a system, that might be something that we can look at for the long term. I'm going to be working for 20 more years, so we'll see what that looks like. But I mean, I think that's a really valid point. Is that in as much as we think the interventions that we're delivering are providing the intended outcomes, there's also a measuring function there of the time frame of measurement and the duplication or the multiple times that we're going to measure over the course of several years, and how do we really know that, what that impact is. I do have a question for anybody in the group. Do we have any of representatives of childcare or early learning in the group? Oh, Gabriella. Okay. Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So this is really, because this is something I've been struggling with. You know, there's a point where evidence-based interventions make sense when you're talking about workforce development, or at least in my mind, there's an easier connection for that. But when you're talking about early learning and childcare service delivery, there's a piece of it that I think can fit in with the quality framework that we're doing to support providers. But I'm curious if anybody's actually done any work around the childcare scholarship and supporting any evidence of improved impact to families or improved impact based on the receipt of those scholarships. And this isn't to put anybody on the spot, I was just curious. Or what your thoughts are about how an evidence framework, I guess. Let me rephrase this. What are your thoughts about how an evidence framework can apply to the current funding situation for childcare? Do you have any? I'm not sure. And that's okay.
Okay, so we're super early. But I really don't have anything else. These slides will be on our website. I did notice a couple of you taking pictures of them, but they will be on our website. You can always reach out to me via phone, email, however, in person if you want, because I always love to see people. And other than that, you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.